Let's get this wild conversation started. Welcome to the Wild Conversation podcast, where human being and human doing converge, reshaping the world of leadership, culture, and performance. Today, we get to hear from Dr. Rob McKenna, named among the top 30 most influential IO psychologists and featured in Forbes. Dr. Rob McKenna is the founder of Wild Leaders Inc. and the Wild Foundation and creator of the Wild Trust platform. So here's Dr. McKenna.
I am surrounded by so many people who are trying to get themselves into their sweet spot. I've been there myself. I understand what that's like. So many people who are trying to get into that place where they feel like everything is just clipping along. They feel that sense of alignment between what's going on for them personally and what's going on for them professionally. They feel like they're on the mission. They feel like they're doing what they're supposed to do. And in fact, we used to ask this question in some of our research years ago. It's like, to what extent are you doing what you're supposed to be doing, regardless of the expectations of others? Like, putting all that aside, do you feel that sense of being in that sweet spot? And it doesn't matter what level people are. Sometimes some of those folks are folks who are first-time managers, just getting started in their career. You face this throughout these different seasons of your life. Even way more seasoned leaders experience this, and they get into executive roles and they feel that sense of just being off. So I wanted to talk about that today, and what it means to find your sweet spot and to be in that. Like, what do we know about what it takes to get there, and to be in that? And right now I'm looking at a picture that I kind of have always appreciated and hated. It's a picture that was taken in about 1988, and at the time I was playing collegiate tennis, and they had a photographer come out. So we had this moment where, you get these cool professional pictures, of this particular moment, and it's a cool picture. I think it's because I appreciate it for so many reasons that are far beyond the reality that at the time, like Guns N' Roses and U2 ruled the world. That's a whole other story that my sons actually, I realized that they weren't actually sure who U2 was. And so though some of you will be laughing that that's a thing, but it captured a moment that was really important, for me, because it captured me when I was actually doing something that I deeply love to do, is play competitive tennis. That time of playing collegiate tennis was really important to me, being on a team. All of those things were so critical. And it's also like I was probably in the best shape of my life, and all that. I had a wicked, wicked mullet, that my wife would say was like, she just loved that mullet. But I'm like, it probably never should have come back at that time. But you're looking at this, so I'm looking at this picture, and it's me in this moment that I do appreciate so much. But there's things about it that I don't appreciate that I'd like to describe to you. And it's so I was caught in this moment where I was doing something I loved. But as I look at this picture now, there's something else, if you could see it, is this. There are positive reminders of me being in my groove, but there's something else. And the picture, while it is an epic display of a haircut that never should have come back, but did, it caught a moment when it is absolutely obvious that I'm about to miss the sweet spot. And the reason why is as you look at the picture, I'm hitting a backhand, and the ball is, if you think about the string bed on the racket, is at the bottom of the string bed. So it's not quite hitting the racket. And those of you who played tennis know what I'm talking about when you do hit the racket, but it's at the bottom of the string bed. So let me tell you a little bit more about that. So the sweet spot on a tennis racket is somewhere between the middle of the strings and it's near the middle of the strings and the place on the string bed. So imagine the strings are crossing each other across a tennis racket, and it's where the energy is transferred to the ball with the most efficiency. So it's near the center, and when you strike the ball there, it's really important. It transfers energy to the ball with the most efficiency. So when that happens, speed on the ball requires less effort, and the force is greater. So you get more spin. More spin can be generated if you want that, and everything just works better. And anyone who appreciates tennis or other racket sports, or even like baseball, knows that electrifying feeling of striking a ball right in the sweet spot. That sound is so satisfying, and it just feels so right. But when you miss that spot, it can be really, really jarring. At least in tennis, when you miss the sweet spot, it not only affects the efficiency with which you hit the ball, it also sends a shuddering sensation throughout your elbow. Like anybody who's had tennis elbow, and if you strike a ball outside of the sweet spot, like it can really hurt, especially if you've got some of that kind of pain going on. It can send that through your arm and your shoulder, and it can send shockwaves throughout your body. It just feels wrong, especially when you catch the racket with the ball and not the strings. Um, and internally, it is disturbing, and that clunk of missing the sweet spot also has physical outcomes that are not only embarrassing, but are clear indicators that we've missed the ball, that we've missed the mark. Balls flying over fences, and they tend to be sprayed all over the court or the court next to you. So you're like, hey, can you pass me that ball, to the people who are playing next to you? And there's not only disturbance within us, but a disturbance that impacts the visible realities around us. That's the point I was trying to make with that. It becomes obvious to us that, and everyone else, that our intent didn't align with the outcome. We missed, and we missed badly. But when we hit the ball in that sweet spot, everything is better. When we're in that sweet spot, everything hums as opposed to clunks or creaks. And there are few things as powerful as the moment you find yourself in your sweet spot. These are the moments when the whole of you is expressed in perfect alignment with what you're doing. And it is almost euphoric. It's almost like that, as if everything around you is moving. It's almost like it's moving in slow motion. And while within you, there's an excitement and an ease that gives you that sense that you are right where you are supposed to be, doing exactly what you are supposed to be doing. And it's not that these moments aren't full of pressure. So it's not about that, but they're different because while we are full of anxious anticipation, there's alignment. These can be really rough times when you're in your sweet spot, by the way. It can be, but there is alignment. And these moments are so critical for us, but we don't usually get there by accident. That's one of the other realities. Or even if we do stumble into that realization that we just aligned who we are with what we're doing, we get that ball strike, all of a sudden we're like, that is the moment. Even if we do get that, the intentionality going forward to remain there is so important. And these moments in the sweet spot are massive indicators that our purpose is clear and aligned with the outcomes. Get that? Our purpose is clear and it's aligned with the outcomes. So the things that are happening inside of us are aligning with what's going on outside of us. We are more efficient. We perform at our best. We're more motivated. And it not only impacts us, but everyone around us. And unfortunately, many of us have spent a lot of time outside that sweet spot. We may not be missing the ball completely, but we feel that deep desire to feel alignment, to feel whole, to perform at our best, and to feel engaged and driven forward in our efforts to make a difference. And I've been there. I've had many moments where I've been there. And anyone who knows me knows that I am most motivated and aligned when I'm fulfilling my mission and responding to the call on my life. Like when that is going on and things are clipping along, my team is moving along, it's like I'm doing what I know I'm supposed to be doing. And again, these can be very, very high pressure kinds of moments. I don't want all the pressure, but I'm still in that sweet spot. And when what I'm responsible for, like for writing and producing, for even, is impacting others. Like even as I'm recording this whole segment right now, if I know and I have that connection that it's making a difference and that someone might benefit from this, it makes it's a huge motivator in me, which is a whole other conversation. And while for example, while I'm a pretty good writer, I'm a pretty good thinker, I'm a pretty good content producer, in seasons where I have not been able to get out on the road and speak to leaders and organizations, I become a little bit dry, a little bit outside of my sweet spot. Like I love writing. There's a whole story around that, what I just said, but it's like I actually more love writing things. I like having things written. But if I get in these seasons, and I do, but there's parts that I really enjoy, but what I really enjoy is that connection where I can see the influence of that content on people. And so that's why when I get a chance to get on the road, it really is important. And in one of those seasons, I actually had someone, this is where I was not getting out there, who said, I look defeated. And I was like, oh my goodness. I think what struck me about this is that's what I was actually feeling. And I think that they sensed it. It was actually showing up on my face. And it was a strange revelation because my work was good. My team was strong, but I did feel somewhat a little bit defeated might be a strong word, but just a sense of not quite being in that sweet spot. And I know myself well enough to know that I'm motivated by seeing the people and experiencing the lights turning on with them. And as a touring musician that I know told me, he said, I love writing music, but if I don't get out and perform and see the people, I start to kind of erode. And when those moments of missing the sweet spot stretch out from days to months, and sometimes from months to years, it can be really, really hard. And we begin to sometimes even, I would say, we begin to almost envy people who have found it. Like they are in that moment, and we can feel that sense of even envy. And those who are able to do what they do best and are feeling so good, it's something that we want. We want to be those people. And when you're continually missing it day after day, it can be incredibly defeating. Even if you aren't fully missing the ball, like being just outside the sweet spot can even be frustrating. And while we got to always be willing to function outside that perfect alignment, we have to, because I'll say more about that in a second. We have to be able to do that because a lot of life isn't like you're going to be just feeling like, oh, I'm striking it perfectly all the time. But what if we could have more seasons and more moments where that's happening? And we all need to be right in there and right in it. So how do we find a sweet spot? Like where do we begin? And I'm going to give you some ideas based on some of the research that's out there on some of the places to begin that'll hopefully be pretty practical. So one thing is, while it would be a lot easier to just fall into the sweet spot, like oh my gosh, I just found the moment. And some people, I think there is a sense of like serendipity in that whole process. But that's not the way it happens most of the time. And like ask any leader, any tennis player, any musician, or any parent who found it, and they'll tell you that it took time and intentionality. We don't typically get into that groove we are all seeking by accident. We get there intentionally with an openness to the purposeful coincidences. We get there intentionally with an openness to the purposeful coincidences that give us a glimpse into the calling and purpose of our lives and our work. So where do we begin? Here are evidence-based tips for getting there more often. Number one, know where you want to hit the ball. This is my translation. Clarify your purpose and mission. Did you know that if you think about where you want to hit the ball, that you are more likely to hit it there? Just hitting the ball without any vision for its intended destination might be good when we're just getting started. Like you just got to start hitting balls. I get that. But as we progress, we have to think about where we want to end up and not just how to strike the ball. It's just like a clear vision of where we want to hit the ball actually impacts our ability to hit the ball there. Having a clear mission and vision for what you want to achieve is critical. As a mountain bike instructor once told me, I wrote about this in my first book, look where you want to go because you will go where you look. What do you want to be doing and why? The more clear you are about your destination or the outcome you want, the more likely you are to get it. So ask yourself this: do you know where you want to be next? If you don't know, think about it, write it down, and share it with somebody. And if you really want to get into the sweet spot, consider not only where you want to be, but why and for whose sake. So number two, that's all number one. Number two, keep your eye on the ball. This is the translation. Be specific. When I would hit the tennis ball, I'd get way more specific than just keep your eye on the ball. But as my military friends have told me repeatedly, aim small, miss small. Specificity matters, but it can feel a little ridiculous. And we treat specificity as if it's too much in the trees, but it's not. Being specific when you do anything is important because specificity breeds accountability and purposeful action. It is difficult to be accountable for something that's not specific. It isn't enough to know that you are a great singer or great at math or you want to lead. What kind of singer are you? What kind of math lights you up? And where specifically do you want to be, or where do you want to lead? Those questions are specific and will drive intention and purposeful action. And when I used to teach kids to hit tennis balls, it wasn't even enough to keep their eye on the ball. I would try to tell them to read the writing on the ball. Read the writing on the ball or look at the seams. You know how most tennis balls have like the brand and then a number, like it's Wilson 3 or Penn 1. I tell them, like, try to tell me what the actual number is on the ball. And it was a way to trick them into specificity in some ways. It's impossible to be in the sweet spot without focused attention on the specific things you must see in order to get there and remain there. And ask yourself this: have you picked specific actions to take that? Well, if you think about that, it will get you closer to your sweet spot. Like if you've taken those actions to do that, you can't get there without that specificity. What are 3 things maybe that you could do today that are aligned with where you want to be next? Number 3, know how you hit the ball. Know how you hit the ball. This is the translation. Know yourself. When I played competitive tennis, one of the most important things to know about me was that I hit the ball with a lot of topspin. And what that means is that I had a particular grip, at the time it was called a Western grip, on the tennis racket that caused the racket face to be more closed than open. And I know that you may not understand that because you're not deeply into tennis, but I had this crazy grip that was crazy at the time. Now tons of people use a Western grip, but at the time it was kind of new. And that way of holding the racket was necessary for me to generate the topspin. I was more naturally designed to produce. And when the racket face is more closed, it actually decreases the size of the sweet spot. It's kind of interesting. I won't get into all the physics of that, but just trust me on that. But it also gave me a wicked amount of topspin on the ball. And the sweet spot was smaller, but the spin I was able to produce was unique to me. Not unique completely, but it was the way that I did it. And there was other people like that. And it's not only specificity in what we want that matters, but also specificity in knowing ourselves. Every one of us is so unique. And while there's basics that we all share, the way that the basics work out in each of us is very different. And while all of us have to be able to hit the ball over the net to play tennis, the way we hit the ball is nuanced and is what makes the game so interesting to watch. So imagine watching a tennis match where every player hit the ball exactly the same way. Boring, boring, boring. In the same way, knowing yourself well is not only key for being in the sweet spot, but for building trust in high-performing teams. So when you begin to know your own motivations, your purpose and calling, your personality, and the things you do really well, and again, those are all common factors, but they work themselves out differently in different people's lives, you begin to see more opportunities that will feel like your sweet spot. And sure, like learning and changing will always play a role in you finding and remaining in that space, in that spot. But when you begin to know yourself more honestly and accurately and share that awareness with others, opportunities to find that alignment will begin to emerge in ways that will honestly surprise you.
Building trust in your business starts with being able to measure it so that you can create a pathway for change. Our Wild Trust Index measures the drivers of trust at the personal, team, and organizational levels. We are building the largest database on the drivers of trust inside of organizations. This survey will inform growth imperatives and the necessary organizational change needed to fuel that growth. For more information, visit wildleaders.org, click on the Wild Trust platform, and get started with the Wild Trust Index today.
Number 4, learn from the misses. Learn from the misses. Translation: failing plays an important role in finding our sweet spot. When we are lost, we are tempted to speed up and just to try harder. We just are tempted to do that. The old saying, if at first you don't succeed, try again, is way oversimplified. I've seen it on the tennis court. If you don't stop to examine why you're missing and becoming aware of the whole reality of what's going on, you will likely just repeat the same missed pattern over and over again. You'll miss the ball the same way. And the reality is that seasons where we are off have a lot to offer us. These are the moments when our convictions deepen. We become aware of the things we don't do well, and we also realize where we must improve. Slow down to see what is actually happening. And this is so hard to do when the pressure's on, but we cannot be guilty of speeding up when we must slow down or even stop. Slowing down requires patience because we don't always understand exactly why we are missing it right away. It takes time to understand what we need to change to get into that zone. If you took a moment to pause and think about what you're missing, what would you see? What is it that you're doing over and over again that isn't getting you to what you are seeking? What is it you are doing that feels just a little bit off the mark? One of the ways to think about where you're missing today is to consider where you felt most in your sweet spot in the past. Who were you with when you felt that level of alignment? What were you working on? How were you working on it? What was it about that situation that made it feel so aligned and purposeful and energizing for you? And then this, number 5, seek feedback. Translation, get coaching and talk with others. None of us are smart enough to figure this out on our own. This is one of the reasons that coaching has become a huge industry. We need outside insight into what we are doing and where we're going. Some of the feedback I got from my college coaches was not fun to hear. There were things I needed to change that I didn't feel natural or were against the grain of the way I wanted to play. But the feedback I received was important. And in some cases, the feedback I received was actually not the right coaching. That happened. There's an honesty in that, right? But when I stopped to think about it, realizing it was slightly off, think about that was important for me in understanding what my own sweet spot looked like. Because in some cases, you had coaches who were trying to help you become like them. And maybe they didn't see me as accurately as they could. But I did learn from it. In the end, none of us are wise enough. In the end, let me say that again. None of us are wise enough to figure out our sweet spot on our own. In the end, none of us are wise enough to figure out our sweet spot on our own. We need each other. The first step can be to identify a coach who not only brings wisdom, but maybe a track record. It doesn't have to be a formal coach or a peer. Someone who could do some peer coaching with you. But someone who has a track record of providing the honest feedback and encouragement to others that helped those others move forward. That might be helpful to you. A couple of other things I want to mention about a shared sweet spot. So think about this for a second. This is what makes this a wild story, a whole and intentional leader development story. One of the greatest challenges of life and work is the reality that life isn't typically an individual sport. We live and work in relationship with others who are on their own journey to find that sweet spot. And like us, if they lost it, they are working to get back there themselves. And because we often work closely with these other people, we quickly realize that we don't find or function within that sweet spot alone, but are in it together. That is the nature of a team. And that is where most of us find ourselves. Our sweet spot is more like the game of basketball, probably, than tennis. We must not only find it for ourselves, but in our best future, our own sweet spot is aligned with a larger sweet spot of our team, our organization, or even our family members. And as you begin to know yourself better, you may realize that your sweet spot is a shared one. You thrive and engage on purpose when you can do that with others. Few of us are the lone wolves. And in many ways, functioning as a solo artist can be easier. It can be easier. Most of us are designed to be on mission together, though. So finding a team to be a part of that is looking for your sweet spot to play a unique role in theirs is that next chapter. So I'm looking at, as I draw this to a close, I'm looking at a second picture. And it's a picture of me today at a recent video shoot where I was talking about whole leader development. and our desperation for trust in our world. And I saw this picture recently, and for me, it speaks a lot because it's me sitting on a couch. There's a mic boom above my head. It's just and I know the moment that I was in as I was sitting there. It's kind of there's this sense of intensity in it. It's not a perfect moment. And like the other picture of me just barely being outside of my sweet spot, I know where the adjustments and errors are occurring in this moment. I don't mean just in the picture. I mean in the rest of my life. But there's a lot in this picture for me. It was another moment where I was in the zone. I was operating and speaking out of my expertise, my deepest convictions, and the calling on my life and work. I was aligned with my team and my organization. And I know I was at my own best in my hopes to influence individuals, teams, and leaders toward a pathway to wholeness and trust. I also know that there was a crew, there were like 10 people in the room who were this crew that I actually, even though we were filming something, the way I work was I was trying to see if I could have a positive impact on them through everything I was saying in that moment that was being recorded. Everything was aligned at that moment for me. It was me in my own sweet spot. It wasn't about pleasing everyone or the possibility that everyone would receive it perfectly, but about me and focusing on those who do need that message. And while I don't know what I will make fun of in this picture 20 to 30 years from now, what will be the equivalent of that mullet, I do know that was another moment where I was in it. It inspires me to spend as much time as I can in that spot. And here's the other reality. We all have to be ready for things to change. Like everything else in life, even our own sweet spots will move as we change and the world changes around us. But once we're clear about the specific why behind our drive forward at our core, then the how and what to do next will not only be able to align, but will more naturally align, even more powerfully. Then others can see their own mission in the mission of the business and the ways to connect with us. We all want to know that moment where we experience that sweet spot. And knowing it compels us to know ourselves better. And when the individuals, the leaders, and the team who serve with us can see themselves in it, a completely different kind of value is created. Developing whole leaders and teams works, but without the clarity of mission, we are left attaching ourselves to the first random revenue cart that rolls by, or the first job offer that comes. And when we get intentional about identifying and finding our sweet spot, we no longer flounder, but we fly.
Thank you for listening to this Wild Conversation podcast. For more information, visit wildleaders.org, click on the Wild Trust platform, and get started with the Wild Trust Index today.